The dawn light touched the bruises first, purple and black shadows that wrapped around Lily Zimmerman's throat like a terrible necklace. And when she opened her eyes to the unfamiliar ceiling above her, the memory of the rope burned as hot as the marks it had left behind. She gasped, her hand flying to her neck, fingers tracing the raised welts that proved she had dangled between earth and sky, between life and whatever waited beyond. The room smelled of tobacco and leather, and somewhere nearby she could hear the low murmur of men's voices and the stamp of horses in their stalls. "Easy now," a voice said from the corner, and Lily turned her head too quickly, pain shooting through her damaged throat. A man sat there, half in shadow, his hat tipped low over his eyes. "You have been out for near 2 days. Thought maybe you would not wake up at all." Lily tried to speak, but her throat refused to cooperate, producing only a strangled croak that made her eyes water. The man stood, moving into the light, and she saw he was tall and lean, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of creek water in summer. He could not have been more than 25, she guessed, maybe a year or two older than her own 23 years. "Name's Jack Anderson," he said, pouring water from a pitcher into a tin cup. "Found you yesterday morning hanging from that big cottonwood out past the Wilkins property. Cut you down just in time, looks like. Another minute and—" He trailed off, handing her the cup. "Best drink slow." The water felt like liquid fire going down, but Lily forced herself to take small sips. Her mind raced backward, piecing together fragments of memory. The evening had started peaceful enough. She had been walking back from the general store in St. Joe, Missouri, her arms full of fabric for the dress she had been planning to make. It was June of 1878, and the summer heat had just begun to settle over the Missouri River Valley like a heavy blanket. Then the 3 men had appeared on the road. She knew them by sight, if not by name. Owen Blackthorne, the eldest son of Randall Blackthorne, who owned half the county. His 2 companions were ranch hands who did whatever Owen told them to do. They had been drinking, she remembered that much. The sharp smell of whiskey, the meanness in their eyes. "You are remembering," Jack said quietly, settling back into his chair. "I can see it in your face." Lily nodded slowly, her fingers still pressed to her throat. They had grabbed her, she recalled now. Owen had said something about teaching uppity women their place, about how she had no business turning down his advances at the church social last month. She had fought, kicked, screamed, but they had been too strong and too determined. They had dragged her to that cottonwood tree, fashioned a noose from the rope one of them carried on his saddle, and placed it around her neck with ceremony that suggested they had done this before, or at least thought about it plenty. "Did you see them?" Lily managed to whisper, the words barely audible. Jack leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "I saw 3 riders heading back toward the Blackthorne ranch, but by the time I got you down and made sure you were breathing, they were long gone. I brought you here to my place. It is not much, just a small ranch I am trying to build up, but it seemed safer than taking you back to town." "Why?" Lily forced the question past her damaged vocal cords. "Because whoever did this to you, they thought you were dead. If you show up alive in St. Joe, they might try again to finish what they started." Jack's jaw tightened. "And because Randall Blackthorne owns the sheriff, the judge, and most of the town council. Justice is not exactly easy to come by when you are going up against a man like that." Lily closed her eyes, feeling tears slip down her cheeks. She knew Jack was right. The Blackthornes had settled in western Missouri decades ago, back when it was still rough territory. They had built their fortune on land acquisition and intimidation, and Randall had a reputation for crushing anyone who stood in his way. His sons had inherited his ruthlessness along with his money. "Then I am dead," she whispered. "I might as well be." No, Jack said firmly. You are alive, and we are going to keep you that way, and we are going to make sure those men pay for what they did. Lily opened her eyes to look at him. You do not even know me. Why would you risk going up against the Blackthorns? Jack was quiet for a long moment, his gaze steady on hers. My sister Emma. 5 years ago she caught the eye of the middle Blackthorn son, Marcus. She was 17, pretty as a spring morning and smart too. When she rejected his advances, he and his friends cornered her in the livery stable. He paused, his hands clenching into fists. They did not hang her, but they hurt her bad enough that she never recovered. She died 6 months later from fever that set in from her injuries. The doctor said her spirit had just given up fighting. I am sorry, Lily said, and meant it. So am I, but I learned something from losing Emma. I learned that men like the Blackthorns only have power because good people are too scared to stand up to them. I learned that sometimes you have to fight even when the odds are stacked against you, because the alternative is letting evil go unchecked. Jack stood, moving to the window. You rest now. Get your strength back, and then we will figure out how to get you justice. Over the next week, Lily slowly recovered in Jack's modest ranch house. The bruising on her throat faded from black to purple to a sickly yellow-green, and her voice returned gradually, though it remained raspy and would probably never sound quite the same. Jack proved to be a conscientious caretaker, bringing her meals and changing the cold compresses he placed on her neck to reduce the swelling. She learned that he had been working his small ranch alone since his father died 2 years prior. He raised horses, bred them for temperament and endurance rather than speed, and had started to build a reputation for quality stock. He was patient and thoughtful, never pushing her to talk about what happened but always willing to listen when she needed to. I came to St. Joe 3 years ago, Lily told him one evening as they sat on his porch watching the sun set over the rolling Missouri hills. My parents died in a fire back in Illinois, and I had no other family. I had learned dressmaking from my mother, so I thought I could make a living here. The town needed a seamstress and the rent was cheap. You have been making it work, Jack said. It was not a question. I was, until Owen Blackthorne decided he wanted something I was not willing to give. Lily's hand moved unconsciously to her throat. I should have been more careful. Should have made sure I was never alone where he could find me. This was not your fault, Jack said sharply. Do not let yourself think that way. Owen Blackthorne is a grown man who made a choice to hurt you. That is on him, not you. Lily looked at him in the fading light, at the strong line of his jaw and the intensity in his eyes. You really believe we can get justice against him? I do. But it is not going to be easy and it is not going to be quick. Jack turned to face her fully. We need evidence. We need witnesses. We need to build a case so strong that not even Randall Blackthorne's money and influence can make it go away. How do we do that? We start by documenting everything. I want to photograph those marks on your neck, and I want you to write down everything you remember about that evening, every detail no matter how small. Then we start asking questions, quiet-like. See if there are other women the Blackthorns have hurt. See if we can find anyone willing to testify. Lily felt a spark of hope kindle in her chest. There was a woman, maybe 8 months ago. Her name was Sarah Crawford. She left town suddenly, and there were rumors that Marcus Blackthorne had been bothering her. She might talk to us. Where did she go? I heard she went to live with relatives in Kansas City. Jack nodded. Then that is where we will start. But first, you need to be strong enough to travel, and we need to make sure no one in St. Joe knows you are alive until we are ready. The decision was made. For the next 3 weeks, Lily stayed hidden at Jack's ranch while he made trips into town to gather supplies and information. He told anyone who asked that he was staying busy with his horses, and planning to drive a small herd to market in Kansas City come August. No one suspected that the woman everyone believed dead was living under his roof. During those weeks, something shifted between them. It started small, with shared meals and conversation that stretched long into the evening. Jack told her about growing up in Missouri, about learning to break horses from his father, about his dreams of building something lasting and good. Lily shared her own stories, about her childhood in Illinois, about her mother's patient lessons in needlework and design, about the loneliness of starting over in a new place with no family to anchor her. They worked side by side in companionable silence, Lily mending his worn shirts and torn trousers while Jack repaired tack and doctored the horses. She found herself watching him when he thought she was not looking, admiring the efficient way he moved, the gentleness in his hands when he handled the animals, the quick intelligence in his eyes when they discussed their plans. One evening, as Lily was washing dishes after supper, Jack came up behind her to set his empty coffee cup in the basin. His hand brushed hers, and the contact sent a jolt of awareness through her. She looked up to find him staring at her, something unreadable in his expression. "Lily," he said softly, then stopped, seeming to struggle with his words. "What is it?" she asked, her pulse quickening. "I just want you to know that whatever happens with the Blackthorns, you have a place here for as long as you need it. I know you are planning to go back to your dressmaking eventually, but if you ever need somewhere safe, somewhere to call home, my door is open." The sincerity in his voice made her throat tighten with emotion. "Thank you, Jack. That means more than you know." He nodded, started to turn away, then stopped. "There is something else. I know the timing is wrong, and I know you have been through hell, but I need to be honest with you. These past weeks, getting to know you, seeing your strength and courage, I have come to care for you. More than I probably should." Lily's breath caught. She had felt the pull between them growing stronger with each passing day, but she had told herself it was just gratitude, just the natural bond formed by shared adversity. Now, hearing him put words to what she had been afraid to acknowledge, she realized her feelings ran much deeper than gratitude. "Jack," she said quietly, setting down the dish she had been washing, "I care for you too, but you are right about the timing. I need to see this through first. I need to face what happened and make sure those men cannot hurt anyone else, and I need to know that what I am feeling is real, not just because you saved my life." "I understand," Jack said, though disappointment flickered across his face. "We will take it slow. Focus on getting you justice first. The rest can wait." But despite their agreement to keep things simple, the awareness between them continued to grow. Lily caught herself thinking about Jack constantly, noticing small things like the way his hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck when it got too long, or the way his whole face transformed when he smiled. She found excuses to be near him, to brush against him in passing, to watch his hands as he worked. Jack was equally affected, she could tell. His gaze lingered on her more often, and he found reasons to touch her in small, fleeting ways. A hand on her shoulder as he passed behind her chair. Fingers brushing hers when he handed her a cup of coffee. The tension built between them like a summer storm gathering on the horizon, electric and inevitable. By mid-July, they were ready to make their move. Jack had tracked down Sarah Crawford's address in Kansas City through a friend who worked for the railroad. The photograph of Lily's injuries, taken by a traveling photographer Jack had paid handsomely for his discretion, was safely tucked away with her written testimony. They had also discovered that Owen Blackthorne had a reputation for violence that extended beyond Lily and Emma. There had been at least 3 other incidents in the past 5 years, all involving young women who had rejected his advances, all swept under the rug by his father's money and influence. "Are you ready for this?" Jack asked as they prepared to leave for Kansas City. He had hitched up his wagon and packed supplies for the multi-day journey. Lily touched her throat, feeling the faint ridges that would always remind her of how close she had come to death. "I am ready." The trip to Kansas City took 3 days of hard travel. They followed the Missouri River east, camping at night under the vast prairie sky. On the second night, as they sat by their campfire, Jack finally asked the question Lily had been expecting. "What will you do after this is all over? Assuming we succeed and the Blackthorns face justice, will you go back to St. Joe?" Lily stared into the flames, considering. "I do not know. Part of me wants to go back and reclaim my life there, show everyone that I survived and that I am not afraid. But another part of me thinks maybe it is time for a fresh start somewhere new." "You could stay at my ranch," Jack said quietly. "Not just as a guest, but as a partner. I have been thinking about expanding, maybe starting a breeding program for cattle as well as horses. I could use someone with business sense and a steady hand. And—" He paused, meeting her eyes across the fire. "And I would like the chance to see where this thing between us might go if you are willing." Lily's heart hammered in her chest. "Jack, I want that too, but I need to be honest with you. I am not the same woman I was before the hanging. What they did to me, it changed something inside. I have nightmares almost every night. I wake up feeling the rope around my throat, unable to breathe. I do not know if I will ever fully heal from that." "I do not expect you to be unchanged," Jack said, moving to sit beside her. "What happened to you was terrible, and it left scars that go deeper than what shows on your skin. But scars do not make you broken, Lily. They make you a survivor. And I am not looking for some perfect woman who has never known hardship. I am looking for a partner who knows what real courage means, who fights even when she is scared, who refuses to let evil win." He took her hand carefully, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "I am looking for someone exactly like you." Lily felt tears spill down her cheeks, but they were tears of relief and hope rather than sorrow. "I do not want to wait any more," she whispered. "I know we said we would take things slow, but life is too short and too uncertain. I almost died, Jack. And the thing I keep thinking about, the thing that haunts me almost as much as the memory of that rope, is that I would have died without ever telling you how I feel." "And how do you feel?" Jack asked, his voice rough with emotion. "I am falling in love with you," Lily said simply. "Maybe I already have fallen. I know it is fast, and I know the circumstances are far from ideal, but it is the truth. You saved my life, yes, but more than that, you gave me a reason to fight for it. You made me want to live again, want to hope again." Jack cupped her face gently in his hands, careful to avoid the still sensitive skin of her throat. "I love you too, Lily Zimmerman. I think I started falling the moment I saw you fighting for breath, still alive against all odds, and every day since has just made me more certain." He kissed her then, soft and careful, and Lily felt something inside her ease, some tight knot of fear and pain beginning to loosen. This was what healing felt like, she realized. Not the absence of scars, but the presence of hope. Not forgetting what had happened, but refusing to let it define her future. They reached Kansas City on the afternoon of the third day. The city was booming, having recovered from the violence of the border wars and the Civil War that had torn Missouri apart in the previous decades. Buildings rose high against the sky, and the streets were crowded with people going about their business. Sarah Crawford lived in a modest boarding house on the east side of the city. She was a slight woman with auburn hair and wary eyes that grew wider when she opened her door to find Lily and Jack standing there. "I know you," she said to Lily. "You are the seamstress from St. Joe, but I heard you were dead." "That is what the Blackthorns think," Lily said. "Can we come in?" "We need to talk to you about Marcus Blackthorne." Sarah's face went pale, but she stepped aside to let them enter. Her room was small but neat, with a narrow bed and a desk where she had been writing letters. "What do you want to know?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lily told her story first, sparing no details about what Owen and his companions had done to her. She showed Sarah the photograph of her injuries and the written testimony. When she finished, Sarah was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. "It happened to me too," Sarah said. "Not exactly the same, but similar enough. Marcus cornered me in the alley behind the dry goods store. He tried to force himself on me, and when I fought back, he hit me so hard I saw stars. His friends held me down while he did what he wanted." Her voice broke. "I tried to tell the sheriff, but he said it was my word against that of a respected citizen, and everyone knew what kind of girl worked alone in a store with no male relatives to protect her. He made it sound like I had invited the attention." "Will you testify against him?" Jack asked gently. "I know it is asking a lot, but if we can get enough women to come forward, we might be able to build a case that even Randall Blackthorne cannot dismiss." Sarah was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands. Finally, she looked up, and Lily saw something hard and determined in her eyes. "Yes. I will testify. I left St. Joe because I was too ashamed and scared to fight back. But I have regretted that decision every day since. If there is a chance to make sure what happened to me does not happen to someone else, I have to take it." They spent the next 2 days in Kansas City, working with Sarah to document her story and take her sworn statement before a notary. Sarah also gave them names of 2 other women she knew had been victimized by the Blackthorne sons, one still living in St. Joe and one who had moved to Jefferson City. "This is good," Jack said as they prepared to head back to Missouri. "With multiple victims willing to testify, we have a real case. But we need to be smart about how we proceed. If we go to the local sheriff, he will just warn the Blackthornes and they will either flee or find a way to silence everyone." "Then we need to go over his head," Lily said. "What about the federal marshal's office? They handle cases of organized crime and corruption, do they not?" Jack's eyes lit up. "That is exactly right. There is a federal marshal who works out of Jefferson City, a man named Thomas Garrett. I have heard he is honest, not in anyone's pocket. If we can get him interested in the case, he has the authority to override local law enforcement." They decided to make the trip to Jefferson City immediately. The state capital was a full day's journey west, back along the Missouri River. They traveled quickly, both of them aware that every day that passed was another day the Blackthornes could hurt someone else. Marshal Thomas Garrett was a grizzled man in his 50s with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much suffering. He listened to their story without interruption, his expression growing grimmer with each detail. When they finished and laid out all their evidence, photographs, written testimonies, and the names of witnesses willing to testify, he sat back in his chair and studied them both carefully. "This is solid work," he said finally. "More than solid. This is the kind of case that could break the Blackthorne stranglehold on western Missouri, but you need to understand what you are getting into. Randall Blackthorne has money, power, and no scruples about using violence to protect his interests. If I move on this, if I start making arrests, people are going to get hurt, maybe killed." "People are already getting hurt," Lily said, her voice steady despite the fear curling in her stomach. "Those men tried to murder me, and they have hurt who knows how many others. If we do nothing, they will just keep doing it." Garrett nodded slowly. "You are right, and I have been looking for a way to bring the Blackthornes to justice for years. They run that part of the state like their own personal kingdom, and it is about time someone reminded them that the law applies to everyone." He stood, extending his hand first to Jack, then to Lily. I will need a few days to coordinate with other federal officers and to get warrants issued. But once I have everything in place, we will move fast and hard. The Blackthorns will not know what hit them. Thank you, Lily said, shaking his hand firmly. Thank you for believing us. I believe in the law, Garrett said simply. And the law says no man is above justice, no matter how much land or money he has. Jack and Lily spent the next several days in Jefferson City, staying at a modest hotel and waiting for Garrett to make his move. The waiting was almost unbearable. Lily found herself jumping at every sound, expecting at any moment to hear that the Blackthorns had discovered she was alive and had sent someone to finish what Owen started. But Jack was a steady presence beside her, calming her fears and keeping her focused on the future rather than the past. They spent their evenings walking along the river, talking about what they would do once this was all over. Jack described his plans for the ranch in detail, painting a picture of a life that seemed almost too good to be true. A house with a real porch and glass windows. Pastures full of horses and cattle. Maybe children someday, a family to fill the empty spaces. I want all of that with you, Lily told him one evening as they watched the sun set over the Missouri River. I want to build a life where we do not have to be afraid, where we can just be happy. We will have it, Jack promised, pulling her close. Once this is done, once the Blackthorns are behind bars where they belong, we will go back to my ranch and start over. No more running, no more hiding, just us and whatever future we can build together. He kissed her then, and Lily let herself sink into it. Let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, they really could have the happy ending they both wanted so desperately. On the morning of the 5th day, Marshal Garrett sent word that he was ready to move. He had assembled a team of 6 federal officers and obtained warrants for the arrest of Owen Blackthorne, Marcus Blackthorne, and 4 of their known associates. The charges included attempted murder, assault, conspiracy, and intimidation of witnesses. I want you both to stay here in Jefferson City, Garrett said when they met at his office. This could get ugly, and I do not want you anywhere near the line of fire. But Jack shook his head. With respect, Marshal, I need to be there. My ranch is just a few miles from the Blackthorne property, and I know the land better than any of your men. I can help you get in position without being seen. Garrett considered this, then nodded. All right, but you stay back when we make the arrests. I do not need civilian casualties on my conscience. What about me? Lily asked. I should be there too. Those men need to see that I survived, that they failed to silence me. Absolutely not, Jack and Garrett said in unison. It is too dangerous, Jack continued. If something goes wrong, if the Blackthorns start shooting, I need to know you are safe. Lily wanted to argue, but she saw the fear in Jack's eyes and understood. He had already lost his sister to the Blackthorns. He could not bear to lose her too. All right, she said reluctantly. I will stay here, but you promise me you will be careful. Do not take any unnecessary risks. I promise, Jack said, kissing her forehead. I will be back before you know it, and this whole nightmare will be over. The federal officers departed that afternoon, a grim procession of armed men heading west towards St. Joe. Jack rode with them, his horse steady beneath him, his rifle in its scabbard on his saddle. Lily watched from the hotel window until they disappeared from sight, then settled in to wait. The next 2 days were the longest of Lily's life. She tried to keep herself busy, mending clothes and reading the newspapers in the hotel lobby, but her mind kept circling back to Jack and what might be happening in St. Joe. She imagined a dozen different scenarios, each worse than the last. Gunfights, ambushes, Jack lying dead in the dirt while the Blackthorns escaped justice once again. She was on the verge of hiring a horse and riding to St. Joe herself when Jack finally returned late on the second evening. He was dusty and exhausted, but he was smiling, and Lily felt her heart soar with relief. "It is done," he said, pulling her into his arms. "Garrett arrested Owen, Marcus, and all of their accomplices." Randall Blackthorne tried to interfere, threatened to have Garrett fired, but the marshal did not budge. They are all sitting in the federal jail right now, waiting for trial. "Was anyone hurt?" Lily asked, pulling back to look at him. "One of Owen's friends tried to draw his gun and got shot in the shoulder for his trouble, but he will live to stand trial. Otherwise, it went smooth as silk. Garrett and his men were professionals, did not give the Blackthorns any chance to fight or run." Jack's expression sobered. Owen's face when Garrett told him you were alive and willing to testify. "Lily, I wish you could have seen it. The color just drained right out of him. I think he is finally starting to understand that his father's money cannot protect him from what he did." "Do you really think they will be convicted?" Lily asked, hardly daring to hope. "I do. Garrett has been collecting evidence all along, and with your testimony and Sarah's and the others, the case is airtight. The trial will be held here in Jefferson City, away from the Blackthorne influence. They are going to pay for what they did, Lily. Justice is coming." Lily felt tears of relief streaming down her face. "I cannot believe it is really happening. After everything, I was so afraid they would just get away with it." "They did not get away with it," Jack said firmly. "You survived, and you fought back, and you won. You should be proud of yourself." The trial began 3 weeks later in the Jefferson City courthouse. Lily gave her testimony on the first day, standing before the packed courtroom and describing in detail what Owen Blackthorne and his companions had done to her. She showed the jury the scars on her neck, the permanent marks left by the rope. She answered every question the prosecutor asked with a clear, steady voice, refusing to let fear or shame silence her. Sarah Crawford testified the next day, followed by 2 other women who came forward with their own stories of abuse at the hands of the Blackthorne sons. By the time the prosecution rested its case, there was not a person in the courtroom who doubted the guilt of the accused. The defense tried to paint the women as liars seeking attention or money, but their arguments fell flat in the face of overwhelming evidence. The photographs, the medical reports, the testimony of witnesses like Jack who had seen the immediate aftermath of the attacks, all pointed to one inescapable conclusion. The Blackthorns were guilty. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood and read the verdict in a clear voice that carried to every corner of the courtroom. Guilty on all counts. Owen Blackthorne and Marcus Blackthorne would spend the next 20 years in federal prison. Their accomplices received sentences ranging from 5 to 15 years. Lily sat beside Jack in the gallery, her hand clasped tightly in his, and felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she had been carrying since the moment that rope tightened around her neck. It was over. She had survived and she had won. The men who tried to kill her would not hurt anyone else for a very long time. Outside the courthouse, Marshal Garrett found them in the crowd. "You did good in there," he told Lily. "Took real courage to stand up and tell your story. A lot of women would not have been able to do it." "I had help," Lily said, squeezing Jack's hand. "I could not have done it alone." "Well, you can both go home now with your heads held high," Garrett said. "Justice has been served." They left Jefferson City the next morning, heading west towards St. Joe and Jack's ranch. Lily felt lighter than she had in months, as if the verdict had given her permission to finally let go of the fear and anger she had been carrying. The physical scars on her neck would never fully fade, but she was learning to see them not as marks of shame but as badges of survival. "What are you thinking about?" Jack asked as they rode side by side through the rolling Missouri countryside. "I am thinking about the future," Lily said. About starting over at your ranch, about building a life together. I am thinking that maybe happiness is not just something that happens to you, but something you choose to create even after terrible things have occurred." "I like the sound of that," Jack said, his eyes warm with affection. "I like the sound of creating happiness with you." They stopped in St. Joe just long enough for Lily to collect her belongings from her old boarding house and to say goodbye to the few friends she had made during her time there. News of the trial had spread quickly, and Lily found that the town's attitude toward her had shifted. Where before she had been dismissed as just another dead girl who should have been more careful, now she was seen as a hero who had stood up to the powerful Blackthornes and won. Several women sought her out to share their own stories of mistreatment and to thank her for her courage. One older woman clasped Lily's hands and said with tears in her eyes, "You did what so many of us were too scared to do. You made this town a safer place for every woman in it." The word stayed with Lily as she and Jack finally made their way to his ranch. It was a modest spread of about 200 acres, with good water and grass and a sturdy house that Jack's father had built with his own hands. The barn was well maintained, and the corral held a dozen horses in various stages of training. "Welcome home," Jack said as he helped her down from the wagon. Home. The word resonated in Lily's chest. She had not had a real home since her parents died, had been drifting from place to place trying to find somewhere she belonged. But standing here with Jack, looking at the house and land that represented his dreams and hard work, she felt that sense of belonging settle over her like a warm blanket. "I love it," she said honestly. "It is perfect." They spent the rest of the summer getting to know each other in the rhythms of daily life. Lily discovered that Jack was an early riser who liked to watch the sun come up while he drank his first cup of coffee. He learned that she hummed to herself when she was concentrating on her sewing, and that she had a surprisingly bawdy sense of humor that came out when she was comfortable. They worked side by side during the day, Jack training horses while Lily worked on building up her dressmaking business again. And in the evenings they sat together on the porch, talking about everything and nothing. The nightmares came less frequently as the weeks passed. When Lily did wake up gasping and clutching at her throat, Jack was there to hold her and remind her that she was safe. He never made her feel weak or broken for her fears. He just loved her through them, patient and steady and sure. One evening in late August, as the first hint of fall began to cool the Missouri air, Jack took Lily's hand and led her out to the pasture where his best horses grazed in the fading light. "I have been thinking," he said, his voice nervous in a way she rarely heard, "about what comes next for us." "And what have you been thinking?" Lily asked, though her heart was already racing because she had a feeling she knew what he was about to say. "I am thinking that I want you to stay here forever," Jack said. "Not as a guest or a partner in the business sense, but as my wife. I want to wake up beside you every morning and go to sleep with you every night. I want to build this ranch into something great together, and maybe raise a family if that is something you want. I want to spend the rest of my life loving you, Lily Zimmerman." He pulled a simple gold band from his pocket, a ring that had belonged to his mother. "I know I should have asked your father's permission first, and I know the timing is not exactly traditional, but will you marry me?" Lily felt tears spill down her cheeks, but they were happy tears this time, tears of joy rather than sorrow. "Yes," she said, her voice strong and clear. "Yes, I will marry you, Jack Anderson. I cannot think of anything I want more." He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Then he kissed her, and Lily felt the last shadows of her trauma begin to fade. She would never forget what had happened to her, would always carry the scars, but she refused to let it define her story. Her story now was about survival and courage and love. Her story was about finding happiness even after darkness tried to claim her. They were married a month later in a simple ceremony at the small church in St. Joe. Sarah Crawford came from Kansas City to stand as Lily's witness, and Marshall Garrett traveled from Jefferson City to give Jack a firm handshake and wish them both well. The church was full of people from the surrounding farms and ranches, good people who wanted to show their support for the couple who had stood up to the Blackthornes. Lily wore a dress she had made herself, cream-colored silk with delicate embroidery at the cuffs and collar. She left her neck uncovered, not hiding the faint scars that remained, claiming them as part of her story rather than something to be ashamed of. When Jack said his vows, his voice was steady and sure. "I promise to love you through good times and bad, through sickness and health, through joy and sorrow. I promise to be your shelter in every storm, your partner in every challenge, your friend in every moment. I promise to spend every day of my life trying to be worthy of your love and courage." Lily's vows were equally heartfelt. "I promise to love you with everything I am and everything I hope to be. I promise to stand beside you as we build our life together, to support your dreams as you have supported mine, to face whatever comes with faith and hope. I promise to choose happiness with you every single day." The celebration afterward was joyful and full of laughter. They danced until the stars came out, and when they finally returned to the ranch, now officially their shared home, Lily felt more content than she had ever imagined possible. Their first year of marriage was not without challenges. The ranch demanded constant work and attention, and money was tight as they invested in expanding the breeding program. Lily's dressmaking business grew slowly, built on word of mouth and the quality of her work. There were days when they were exhausted, when the bills piled up faster than the income, when they wondered if they had taken on too much. But through it all, they had each other. When Jack worried about a sick horse or a buyer who fell through, Lily was there to remind him that they would find a way. When Lily struggled with a difficult client or a particularly stubborn piece of fabric, Jack made her laugh until the frustration faded. They learned to lean on each other, to trust that together they were stronger than any obstacle they might face. In the spring of 1880, Lily discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with both joy and terror. She wanted children desperately, wanted to fill their home with love and laughter, but she could not shake the fear that her damaged throat might somehow affect her ability to carry a child safely. The doctor in St. Joe, an older man who had been practicing medicine for 30 years, examined her carefully and then smiled. "Your throat injuries have no bearing on your ability to have a healthy pregnancy," he assured her. "You are young and strong, Mrs. Anderson. I see no reason why you should not have a perfectly normal delivery." Jack was ecstatic when she told him, picking her up and spinning her around the kitchen until she laughed and begged him to put her down. "We are going to have a family," he said, his eyes bright with tears. "A real family of our own." Their son was born in November of 1880, arriving on a cold morning when frost covered the ground and the first snow of winter was just starting to fall. Lily labored for 8 hours with Jack holding her hand and the doctor providing calm, steady guidance. When the baby finally emerged, crying lustily and waving his tiny fists, Lily felt a love so fierce it took her breath away. "He is perfect," Jack said, his voice thick with emotion as he held his son for the first time. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names for months but had never quite settled on one. Now, looking at her husband holding their child with such tenderness, Lily knew exactly what she wanted to call him. "James," she said. "After your father, James Anderson." Jack looked up at her, tears streaming freely down his face. "James, I love it. Thank you, Lily, for him, for everything. You have given me more than I ever dreamed of having. Life with a baby was exhausting but wonderful. Little James was a good-natured child who slept reasonably well and smiled early. He had Jack's dark hair and Lily's green eyes, and he seemed fascinated by everything around him. Lily found that motherhood came more naturally to her than she had expected, and Jack proved to be a devoted father who was not afraid to change diapers or walk the floor at night when the baby was fussy. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. By 1882, they had expanded to 500 acres and were running both horses and cattle successfully. Lily's dressmaking business had grown to the point where she was turning away clients, and she had trained 2 younger women from St. Joe to help her with the simpler orders. In the summer of 1883, Lily gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Emma Grace in honor of Jack's sister. Emma had her father's creek water eyes and her mother's blonde hair, and from the moment she arrived, she had her parents wrapped around her tiny finger. 2 children, Jack said one evening as they sat on their porch watching James, now nearly 3, chase fireflies in the yard. Emma slept peacefully in Lily's arms. Sometimes I have to pinch myself to believe this is real, that I get to have this life with you. I know what you mean, Lily said softly. There were times, especially right after the hanging, when I thought I would never feel happy again. When I thought my life was effectively over even though I had survived. But I was wrong. My life was not over. It was just beginning. She looked down at her sleeping daughter, then over at her husband, and felt gratitude wash over her. The scars on her neck were barely visible now, faded to thin white lines that only showed in certain light. But more than that, they had stopped being the first thing she thought about when she looked in the mirror. They were just part of her story now, not the whole of it. In 1885, tragedy struck when a harsh winter decimated their cattle herd. They lost nearly 40% of their animals to the cold and disease, and the financial blow was staggering. For the first time since their marriage, they faced the real possibility of losing the ranch. We could take a loan from the bank, Jack suggested, though Lily could hear the reluctance in his voice. He hated the idea of being in debt. Or we could sell off some of the horses, Lily countered. The breeding stock is valuable enough that we could probably raise what we need without going into debt. They argued about it for days, both of them stressed and short-tempered from worry. Finally, late one night after the children were asleep, they sat down at the kitchen table and really talked it through. I am scared, Jack admitted. My father built this ranch from nothing, and I am terrified of being the one who loses it. You are not going to lose it, Lily said firmly. We are not going to lose it. We have faced worse than this, Jack. We survived attempted murder and brought down the most powerful family in the county. We can survive a bad winter. Jack reached across the table to take her hand. You are right. I am sorry for being so stubborn. We will figure this out together, like we always do. In the end, they did a combination of both strategies. They sold half their breeding horses to a buyer in Kansas City and took a small loan to cover the rest of what they needed. It was difficult, but by the spring of 1886, they had restocked their herd and were back on solid financial footing. The experience taught them valuable lessons about diversification and saving for emergencies. It also brought them closer together, proving that their partnership could weather financial hardship as well as personal trauma. In 1887, their third child arrived, another son they named Daniel Thomas. He was a chunky baby with a serious expression and his mother's stubborn streak. With 3 children under 7, life was chaotic and exhausting, but Lily could not imagine being happier. The years passed quickly after that. James grew into a thoughtful boy who loved working with the horses alongside his father. Emma was bright and curious, always asking questions and reading everything she could get her hands on. Daniel was the wild one, constantly getting into mischief and keeping his parents on their toes. In 1890, when Lily was 35 and Jack 32, they received word that Randall Blackthorne had died in his home, alone and bitter. His sons were still in federal prison, with several more years left on their sentences. The Blackthorne ranch had been sold off piecemeal to pay debts and legal fees. "It is really over," Lily said when Jack told her the news. "The Blackthornes are finished." "Does it feel like closure?" Jack asked, studying her face carefully. Lily thought about it, then shook her head. "No, because I had closure years ago. The closure came when I testified at the trial and saw them convicted. This is just the epilogue, the final page of a story that I already finished writing." As they entered the 1890s, Jack and Lily became respected pillars of their community. Jack served on the county board and helped establish a school district that would serve farming families throughout the area. Lily used her success and visibility to advocate for women's rights and safety, working with other women to establish a shelter for those fleeing dangerous situations. They never forgot where they came from or what they had overcome. Every year on the anniversary of the day Jack found Lily hanging from that cottonwood tree, they took time to sit together and talk about how far they had come. It was not a celebration exactly, but rather a remembrance and recommitment. A reminder that survival was not the end of the story but the beginning. In 1895, when James turned 15, he told his parents that he wanted to study law. "I want to help people the way Marshall Garrett helped you," he said. "I want to make sure that everyone gets justice, not just the rich and powerful." Jack and Lily were immensely proud. They scraped together the money to send him to school in Kansas City, knowing it was an investment in the future they had always dreamed of for their children. Emma followed a different path, showing an aptitude for medicine that surprised and delighted her parents. By the time she was 17, she was apprenticing with the doctor in St. Joe, learning everything she could about healing and helping others. Daniel, true to form, decided he wanted to be a rancher like his father. He had no interest in leaving Missouri or pursuing formal education beyond the basics. He just wanted to work with animals and land, and Jack was secretly thrilled to have one of his children carry on the family business. As the 19th century drew to a close, Jack and Lily found themselves entering middle age with gratitude and grace. They had gray in their hair now, and lines around their eyes from years of squinting into the sun and laughing at their children's antics. Jack's hands were calloused from decades of ranch work, and Lily's fingers bore the permanent marks of countless needle pricks from her sewing. But they were happy. Deeply, genuinely happy in a way that only people who have survived real darkness can appreciate. They had built a life together that was rich not in money but in love, purpose, and meaning. One evening in the summer of 1900, as they sat on their porch watching the sun set over land they had worked together for more than 2 decades, Jack turned to Lily with a smile. "You ever regret it?" he asked. "Staying here in Missouri after everything that happened, you could have gone anywhere, started over completely fresh." Lily took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his in a gesture that had become second nature over the years. "Never," she said firmly. "This is where I found you. This is where I found justice. This is where I found myself again after they tried to take everything from me. Why would I regret that? I love you," Jack said simply. "I have loved you since the moment I cut you down from that tree and saw you fighting to breathe. I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "I love you too," Lily said, leaning her head against his shoulder. "You saved my life in every way a person can be saved. You gave me hope when I had none, justice when it seemed impossible, and a future worth fighting for. You gave me everything." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell, the sounds of their ranch settling for the night all around them. Inside the house, they could hear Daniel moving around the kitchen, probably raiding the pantry for a late snack. James would be arriving from Kansas City next week, having just completed his law degree. Emma had written from St. Joe that she would be home for Sunday dinner, bringing news about her latest patients. Their family had grown and scattered slightly, but the bonds between them remained strong. And at the center of it all was the love story that had started with near tragedy and transformed into something beautiful and lasting. In 1903, James married a smart young woman named Catherine, who shared his passion for justice. They settled in Kansas City, and James opened a law practice focused on helping those who could not afford expensive lawyers. He took on cases of domestic violence and abuse, channeling the lessons his mother had taught him about standing up for the vulnerable. Emma married the following year, choosing a fellow medical student who understood her dedication to healing. They opened a practice together in St. Joe, providing care to everyone regardless of their ability to pay. Daniel married a neighboring rancher's daughter in 1905, a practical woman named Ruth who grew up on horseback and could rope a steer as well as any man. They took over more of the day-to-day operations of the ranch, allowing Jack and Lily to step back slightly and enjoy the fruits of their decades of labor. The grandchildren started arriving in 1904, and by 1910, Jack and Lily were the delighted grandparents of 7. They loved having their house filled with young voices and laughter again, loved watching their children become parents and pass on the values of courage, justice, and love that had defined their own lives. In 1912, when Lily turned 57, she finally closed her dressmaking business for good. Her hands had started to ache from arthritis, and she decided it was time to focus on other pursuits. She started writing, putting down on paper the story of what had happened to her and how she had survived. She did not do it for publication, but rather as a record for her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, so they would know the truth of their family history. Jack read the manuscript when she finished it, tears streaming down his face. "You should publish this," he said. "Other women need to hear this story. They need to know that survival is possible, that justice is possible, that happiness after trauma is possible." But Lily shook her head. "Maybe someday, but not now. Right now, this is just for us, for our family." In 1915, Jack suffered a minor heart attack that scared them both badly. The doctor ordered him to slow down, to let Daniel handle more of the ranch work. Jack complied reluctantly, frustrated by the limitations of his aging body, but grateful for every additional day he got to spend with Lily and their family. They celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary in 1919 with a huge party that brought together everyone they loved. All 3 of their children were there with their spouses and children. Friends and neighbors from throughout the county attended, along with now retired Marshal Thomas Garrett, who was in his 80s but still sharp as ever. "I have presided over a lot of trials in my career," Garrett told the assembled crowd during a toast. "But the trial of the Blackthornes remains the most satisfying, not just because we brought bad men to justice, but because of what happened after." Jack and Lily took their terrible experience and turned it into something good. They built a life that stands as a testimony to the power of love and courage. They raised children who carry on their legacy of fighting for what is right. That is the real victory. The crowd applauded, and Jack pulled Lily close, kissing her temple. 40 years, he murmured, "and I would do it all again in a heartbeat." "Even the scary parts?" Lily asked with a smile. "Even those," Jack confirmed, "because they led me to you." As they entered the 1920s, both Jack and Lily slowed down considerably. Jack was in his early 70s now, Lily in her mid-60s. They spent most of their days on the porch, watching the ranch operate under Daniel's capable management and enjoying visits from their ever-expanding family. The nightmares about the hanging had stopped decades ago, but Lily still sometimes woke in the night and reached for Jack, just to reassure herself that he was there. He always was, solid and warm beside her, the anchor that had kept her steady through 4 decades of life together. In the summer of 1923, they received word that Owen Blackthorne had died in prison. He had served his full sentence and was scheduled to be released in just a few months, but a violent confrontation with another inmate had ended his life. Marcus had been released 2 years earlier and had disappeared. No one knew where. "I should feel something," Lily said when Jack told her the news. "Relief, maybe, or satisfaction, but I just feel empty, like hearing about a character in a story that I read a long time ago and barely remember." "That is good," Jack said. "It means he does not have power over you anymore. He is just a footnote in your life, not a defining chapter." Lily thought about that and realized Jack was right. Owen Blackthorne and what he had done to her was just one small part of a much larger, richer story. The story of her life was not about victimhood or trauma. It was about survival and love and building something beautiful from ashes. In 1925, they celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary with a smaller, quieter gathering than their 40th. Both of them were feeling their age now, moving more slowly and tiring more easily. But the love between them had not diminished. If anything, it had deepened with time, becoming something profound and unshakable. 50 years, Lily marveled as they sat together on the porch, watching the sun set just as they had done thousands of times before. "Half a century of loving you. Best 50 years of my life," Jack said, his voice raspy with age but still warm with affection. "I cannot imagine having spent them with anyone else." "Do you think we did it right?" Lily asked. "Raised good children, built a good life." Jack looked at her, his creek water eyes still as clear and sharp as they had been when he was 25. "I think we did better than right. I think we created something that will last long after we are gone. Our children are good people who are making the world better. Our grandchildren are growing up with love and values. The ranch is thriving. You and I loved each other well for 5 decades. What more could anyone ask for?" Lily smiled, feeling peace settle over her like a warm blanket. "Nothing. I could not ask for anything more." Jack passed away peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1927, just shy of his 79th birthday. He went to bed one evening, kissed Lily goodnight as he had done for nearly 5 decades, and simply never woke up. The doctor said it was his heart, that it had finally given out after years of hard work and good service. Lily grieved deeply but without bitterness. She had known this day would come eventually, had known that their time together was finite. But they had made the most of every moment, had loved each other fully and without reservation. That was something to be grateful for, even in the midst of loss. She lived on at the ranch for another 6 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She spent her days reading, writing letters, and telling stories about Jack and their life together. She wanted to make sure that future generations knew the man he had been, not just the grandfather or great-grandfather they remembered, but the young cowboy who had risked everything to save a stranger and bring justice to the vulnerable. In the fall of 1933, Lily passed away quietly in her sleep, just as Jack had. She was 78 years old and had lived a life full of love, purpose, and meaning. Her children found her manuscript about the hanging, and the trial tucked away in a drawer, and they decided to honor her memory by publishing it. The book, which they titled Rope Marks and Redemption, became a modest success, particularly among women's advocacy groups and criminal justice reformers. It told the story of a woman who refused to be silenced, a man who chose to fight for justice, and a love that transcended trauma and became the foundation for generations of goodness. The ranch remained in the Anderson family for decades, passed down through the generations. Daniel's children and grandchildren continued to raise horses and cattle on the land that Jack and Lily had built together. The house where they had lived and loved and raised their family became a cherished piece of family history, carefully maintained and filled with photographs and mementos from their life together. In the small cemetery outside St. Joe, 2 headstones stand side by side under the shade of an oak tree. One reads Jack Anderson, 1848–1927, beloved husband, father, and champion of justice. The other reads Lily Zimmerman Anderson, 1855–1933, survivor, fighter, beloved wife and mother. Between the 2 stones, carved into a shared base, are the words united in life, united in death, their love endures. And it does endure. In the values passed down through their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, in the ranch that still bears their name. In the story of courage and survival that inspired countless others facing their own darkness. In the simple truth that love, real love, can heal even the deepest wounds and transform tragedy into triumph. The rope had left marks on Lily's neck, but it had not defined her. The cowboy who saved her became the love of her life, and together they built something that lasted. They had found justice, yes, but more importantly, they had found each other. And that, in the end, was the greatest victory of all.